All right. Welcome, everyone. We're certainly glad you can join us here for our interview with the Dean event as part of this year's Alumni Weekend celebration. We're very excited that you could join us today. My name is Tom Addonizio, and I'm the Assistant Dean for Communications and Marketing here at the ILR School. As you can see from my virtual background, we are coming to you here live and direct from high above Cayuga's waters, beautiful Ithaca, New York. And every year at reunions, the dean typically addresses the group and lets everyone know what's been going on at the school. And this year, of course, we're going to do it in a virtual format, given the need to keep everyone safe and remote. We do certainly wish you were here, but since that can't happen, we're going to do our best and do the next best thing to keep everyone informed about what's going on at the school. So today I will have the privilege of interviewing Dean Alex Colvin and asking him about some of the issues that we think are going to be on the top of mind for everyone, and will help keep everyone up to date on what's going on. Before we get to that, I do need to go through a couple of quick logistics here. So this is a Zoom webinar. So everyone but the hosts, you're muted and your video is turned off, so you don't have to worry about that. Alex and I are going to talk for about 30 minutes or so, and then Jennifer Sellin, our Assistant Dean for Alumni Affairs and Development, will join us and ask some of your questions to Alex that you're going to put into the Q&A feed. So speaking of the Q&A feed, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the button, the Q&A button, where you can submit your questions. Please feel free to submit your questions as you have them. You don't have to wait until the end, and that'll help Jennifer compile them and get ready for the Q&A section. All questions are going to be asked anonymously, and we may try to combine similar questions so that we can get to as many of them as we possibly can. So also at the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a chat button. And in the spirit of reunions, right, that's why we're all here, we encourage you to use that chat feature to connect with each other virtually throughout the event, old friends, new friends. And now, without further ado, through the magic of Zoom, it is my great pleasure to welcome the Martin F. Scheinman Professor of Conflict Resolution and the Kenneth F. Kahn Dean of the ILR School, Alexander Colvin. Alex, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Tom. It's a real pleasure to be here, and it's just a pity that everybody can't physically be here on the campus, but it's great to connect at least virtually out to our great family of Cornell and ILR alumni.
Yep, that's great. That's great. That's what we're here for. So let's get started, and we'll get started with a topic that I know that's been on everyone's mind since March, and that's the COVID-19 pandemic. And this pandemic has impacted all of our lives from a public health perspective, and the looming economic issues that come with it, and how much our lives have really changed because of the virus. So Alex, what has been the school's response to the pandemic?
Yeah, so this is not obviously something that I was expecting to be focusing on in my first year in the deanship. This has hit our society pretty broadly, and really 2020. We're experiencing a dual crisis. So obviously in the last couple of weeks, we've seen the great concern all around the country about issues of racial injustice in our society flowing out of the really awful and tragic killing of George Floyd. President Pollock has spoken out about that, expressing her concern and outrage over his killing. I sent a message out to our community this week, and really pushing our faculty, staff, and students to reflect on this in terms of what we do in our work, our teaching, our research, and using our voices to think about what we can do to address issues of racial inequality in our society. Something that's been a concern at the ILR school. It's something that we work on, but I think the events we've seen have renewed the importance of addressing these issues. And it's certainly something we're going to continue to think about. And we see the importance of these issues in our society and share the concern and outrage. Going back to the question of the COVID-19 pandemic, we do see there as well this dramatic impact on our society of this pandemic, the losses that have happened. And I've heard from that there are alumni who have passed away from this awful disease, and so our hearts go out to them and their families, particularly who have experienced these losses. It's something that hit us directly on campus in our operations. We, at the beginning of March, had to turn on a dime, really, and close down classes. Our students left campus, they went back home, and we had to pivot to online teaching starting in April. This was a big task that we had to do, but it's obviously necessary for the protection of public health. And many of our alumni are down in the New York City area, which has obviously been the worst hit part of the country. And so, we hear about this all the time. It's important that we all contribute to doing our part to keep things as safe as possible. For us, this has meant not doing the regular stuff we do on campus, right? We just can't do that safely right now. And so, we put ourselves fully into remote teaching using tools like Zoom. What we're doing right now is what our students have been experiencing finishing up their term.
Yeah, no, it's been, I remember driving off campus the day that they told everyone to go home, and just feeling that sense of, wow, something's really different here and something's really changing.
Yeah, I think it's profoundly changed the way we think and operate. The campus is not the same when it's empty, when we're not going into the office. But it's a collective action we've taken, and I think it's an important thing to come together as a society to respond to collective challenges. That's a lesson we've known for a while in our work, but I think we're seeing it more directly now.
Yeah, and so now that we've hopefully turned a corner a little bit, at least seeing some of the public health numbers getting better, we're getting into that phase where we're starting to return to work, and we're planning on that. Could you talk a little bit about what's happening from that perspective on campus?
Yeah, so certainly, New York State, which was the hardest hit, the numbers have improved, which is really encouraging, and we keep monitoring this. When we have periodic meetings, we're hearing from our colleagues down at Weill Cornell and Dean Troy down there. So we have a sort of direct pipeline into the latest and best medical knowledge about what's going on in public health. Thinking about the return to work, the university's being focused on how we can start operating in a safe manner on campus. Businesses are slowly opening up following Governor Cuomo's multi-phase plan for opening up the state. The university has opened up some of its facilities, but in a slow and very careful manner. So we have lab facilities on campus doing things like research with animals and plants, things that you really need to be doing on campus in the facilities. So those things, we've started opening them up under very kind of careful rules. There was a report put out by the university on reactivation that includes, a lot of rules about social distancing, mask wearing, sanitation, how to be as careful as we can to not encourage the spread of the virus while starting to operate again. And it's going to be a phased approach. We're going to bit by bit expand out the operations on campus, keeping an eye on things to make sure that we're not seeing problems as we expand up the operations. We've had a big advantage at ILR that, we're not like cows. We don't have to have, fields of wheat that we're experimenting on, or voles and cages in our labs. We can do a lot of what we do remotely. We can do it virtually, communicate that way, run our analyses on our computers at home. So we're able to keep doing remote work longer. And so we have not yet gone back into Ives in full operation there because frankly, we don't need to at this point. And so we can safely operate remotely over the summer. And then gradually, I think towards the end of the summer, we'll start, our employees start going back into the facility and start working there again.
Yeah. No, that's great. It definitely feels like we're making progress towards that. And from a student perspective, as we all look forward to the fall semester, I know there's a lot of work going on to figure out what's going on with that. Can you talk a little bit about where the university is with that?
Yeah, that's a huge planning process. We're putting an enormous amount of work into figuring out how to operate in the fall, and no decisions have been made yet. There's a lot of planning going on, but final decisions won't be made till really likely the end of this month, the end of June time. And ultimately, it's going to be a decisions of the provost and the president, whether we will operate in person in the fall. We're certainly putting together planning to be able to do that, but they're not going to do it until they've made a decision that it's safe and we can operate in person in the fall. We have backup plans that we could operate online if we need to, if the public health situation warranted. But we are doing planning for how we could do an in-person fall semester. It won't be, I will say straight up, it will not be the same as a regular semester. The reality is we'll have to have, some classes online, changes to how many people are in a classroom at a time, things to keep the campus safe. We're looking at, obviously, testing so that we can test people, students and faculty and staff coming into the campus to ensure the safety there, and then ongoing monitoring during the term. So there's a lot of work being put into that, and recognizing that Ithaca is a small town in upstate New York that gives us some advantages because we have some isolation. But if we had a major outbreak here, we've got a relatively small public hospital. There's only so many beds here. So we have to be extra careful, and we have a responsibility to this local community that Cornell has inhabited for its over 150 years now.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Just shifting on the same topic a little bit to the external impact of the ILR school with regard to COVID-19. We've done so much from an external perspective, and as the guy who runs the media for the school, we've seen such a big uptick in the amount of interest in people talking to our faculty and our outreach teams. And we've created this work in the coronavirus hub, which has been really successful. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was a really important initiative that we put together, obviously with your help, Tom, taking a lot of leadership there, which was great, but really drawing on our expertise across the faculty, our really amazing outreach division, and all the work that they do to try and put together a set of information and resources for policymakers, for the general public, to find information, insights about issues related to COVID-19 and its impact on the world of work. That's our expertise. How do you work differently given the impacts of the pandemic? How do you deal with the economic fallout? And it's a great web compilation of information about all kinds of important topics related to the world of work. It's really been tremendously successful. There's been about 20,000 views since the launch of it in mid-April. It's actually now our second most viewed ILR website after the ILR homepage. And you can find all kinds of things there, lots of information about economic data, impacts on unemployment insurance processing, which has been a big topic, and things like the impact on vulnerable populations. One of the things we know about this pandemic is it has disproportionately high impact on people of color, minority populations, and so there's some information there about that really important issue.
Yeah, that's great. It's an incredible impact. All right, so let's move to our next topic here that I know is near and dear to the hearts of our alumni, and that is the ILR faculty. So we've had quite a few changes in the faculty even in the last couple of years. And maybe you could talk a little bit about the changing face of the ILR faculty.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been one of the biggest changes the last couple of years, and it's been one of my biggest focuses as dean. We've been experiencing the retirements of some of our really great faculty, things that we knew were coming but have finally come to pass. So faculty like our great former dean, David Lipsky, retired not that long ago, last year. Ed Lawler, also former dean, has now retired this year. Sam Bacharach, a great faculty member for almost 50 years, retired. Lowell Turner, a great comparative international faculty member. So we've been losing to retirement, well-deserved retirements, some really great teachers and researchers. And so it's been really important to focus on renewing the faculty and bringing in new scholars, new teachers who are going to be teaching about really important, interesting topics. So last year, my first time as interim dean, I was overseeing a number of important searches, and we had some really great successes hiring. We hired in our economics group a faculty member away from Duke, Seth Sanders, who's a really prominent labor economist, really the leading economist looking at the impact of sexual orientation in the labor market. We attracted him away from Duke. A younger faculty member, Rebecca Kehoe, we attracted away from Rutgers. She's an excellent strategic human resource management scholar. Strengthening our HR group, which we also strengthened by grabbing another really strong up-and-coming faculty member, Taeyoon Park, from Vanderbilt. He's a scholar of compensation, a really top compensation scholar, and that's an area that we want to build up our strength. We lost the great George Milkovich to retirement. Kevin Halleck, our other great compensation scholar, has now moved over to the College of Business to be dean there. So we really need to build up the strength, and that's what we were focused on, as well as new areas too. We've got a new faculty member, Tristan Ivory, who studies African migration. One of the great international phenomenon these days has been migration out of Africa to other countries, other regions of the world, and he's been looking at the kind of economic and social processes behind those migrations that we're seeing happening. This year, we're continuing to do more hiring. Usually, the hiring is done in kind of around sort of November, December, January, February time, and so we were able to get in some really good hiring before the pandemic hit. So we're going to have some really great new faculty joining us this fall, and really some interesting new areas. So we hired a couple of economists from Europe. They're actually a couple, Philip Kircher and Michelle Belleau, and they're a really interesting, very prominent pair of economists, and they do interesting behavioral economic work. They've together done some interesting experiments looking at economic phenomena, and so it's been a real coup getting them. We've hired a really interesting international labor law scholar, Denise Leclerc, who's currently at the U.S. Trade Representative's office, but she focuses on labor rights in trade agreements, a really important topic in the world of globalization. We're going to have a whole set of actually 8 new faculty joining us in the fall. It's really going to bolster our faculty and offer a lot for the students in terms of new course offerings, and to really fill some of those holes from the retirements that we've suffered. So it's something I'm really excited about looking forward.
Yeah, definitely very exciting. It's going to be great to see them get going here once the new batch arrive. So just sticking with the faculty again, the research production has just been phenomenal. And ILR is really driving such a big impact in the social sciences. So could you talk maybe a little bit about the research and give some examples of research that you think is really cutting edge?
Sure. There is a really exciting bunch of research being done currently by the ILR faculty across a range of different domains. So I'll give a few examples of it. One of our really exciting faculty members who got tenure a couple of years ago is Vanessa Bonds in our organizational behavior department. And she's a psychologist by discipline, but studies issues relating to consent. When you ask somebody to do something, why do they agree to do it, right? And she's shown that people will agree to do things much more than you might expect. One of the great experiments she did was getting Cornell students to deface library books. If you think back to your time on campus, right, the idea of defacing a library book, right? That seems terrible. Well, Vanessa was able to show through her experiments that it's actually not that hard to do if you ask people. If you ask people to do something, they tend to do it. They feel the compulsion to go along with requests much more than we realize. This has practical implications in areas that are very important in society today. She's been using it to look at things like sexual harassment. Why do people comply with demands from their superiors that are sexual harassment? Looking at those kind of processes. Police search and seizure, something that obviously people are thinking about currently. Her research shows a lot about the kind of coerciveness that I think is unrecognized often in demands from authority, people in positions of authority. So really interesting stuff. She's got a book she's going to be finishing up this summer that hopefully will be coming out quite soon. So look for that. We'll be promoting that pretty heavily when it comes out. Another interesting set of research on a very topical issue from Ariel Avgar, one of our faculty members who is both my associate dean for outreach, but also does a lot of work with our Scheiman Institute on conflict resolution. He studies healthcare, employment and labor relations issues. And he's got a really interesting new study with a colleague down at Cornell Weill Medical Center, and then with someone from Cornell Tech, looking at work of healthcare workers during the pandemic. How is the pandemic affecting how healthcare workers do their work? And he's been particularly interested in technology, how that changes how healthcare workers do the work. And this is really cutting edge research, thinking about, how do nurses and doctors whose work is so important right now, how do they work differently when they're dealing with the pressures of a pandemic? We hear these kind of stories in the media. I'm sure we've all read about the pressures on the healthcare workers, how this affects their work experience. And so it's really important cutting edge research. Another important area that faculty looking right now, one of our faculty members, Sarosh Kurvilla, he studies global value chains. One of the major issues in globalization is that we're getting production from around the world, connecting together the clothes we wear. If you're wearing some Big Red merchandise today, you're probably wearing something that was produced in different points in the global value chain. The cotton in something you're wearing might have been grown in Kazakhstan, which is a big cotton producing country, but then woven into fabric in another country, maybe Indonesia, and then sewn in Bangladesh. What are the labor rights across that value chain? How does a responsible company that's selling products here in America ensure that labor rights aren't being violated across those value chains? And Professor Colvin is probably the leading scholar looking at this currently. He's got a book coming out as well next year looking at this question, and has got a whole new research program that he's expanding out, trying to work with companies and come up with ways that they can be more responsible and more effective in ensuring that their products are not being produced under conditions that violate labor rights. So really a broad range of kind of interesting research that's going on right now from our faculty.
Yeah, it's really great stuff. And just on the media side of it, the external impact, it's been amazing how people have come and sought after this research. And Vanessa had a spot on Hidden Brain, which was a dream of hers. So there's a really big impact that this research has, and people are feeling it.
Yeah, and I think we've done a great job of trying to push this out. And if people listening in are sort of would like to kind of delve a little more into it, there's a lot of resources on the ILR website that you can kind of browse through and find out about what our faculty are doing. So kudos to you and the communications team in putting out that information.
Thank you. All right, so now shifting to another topic, I want to take it up a level and look from an overall perspective at the ILR school. And since you've become dean about a year and a half with your interim appointment, you've done so much work looking at the strategy of the school and how do we make an impact. So could you talk to us a little bit about your top priorities of the school, the areas of focus and the things that you believe are the most important to the future of the school?
Sure. And so I'll start with one that we've already touched on, and that's the faculty hiring. That's essential for the future of the school, to have a really strong faculty who can be doing this exciting research, but also there for the students, providing a really dynamic, innovative curriculum, teaching those really great courses. And so continued faculty hiring is going to be a big priority for me. It's going to be tougher the next couple of years because of the economic impact of the pandemic, but this is going to be a continued strategic priority for me, is to renew the faculty. This is an important period for that, so we're going to keep working on that. A second one is strengthening our centers and institutes. We have a lot of really amazing centers and institutes where we organize our research in particular areas, but then also use them to have impact on the world of work. They're how we do outreach to the world beyond the campus. So some examples of really important ones. We've got the Scheinman Institute on Conflict Resolution, which I've already mentioned, and that I've done a lot of work with. That's really the world's leading institute looking at workplace conflict resolution. A very important part of what we do at the ILR school. There's the Yang Tan Institute on Employment and Disability. One of the most vulnerable groups we know in the labor market are people with disabilities, and Yang Tan Institute is really the leading institute that looks at issues related to employment and disability. Very important part of what we do. The Worker Institute that organizes our work that is connected to the labor movement, and also does really important work related to vulnerable populations. Precarious work has been one of their big focuses, and I think it's really important to strengthen the Worker Institute. Another one, CARS, our Center for Advanced Human Resource Studies, really the leading academic institute looking at human resource studies, with kind of an amazing set of corporate partners to CARS. These centers and institutes are real pillars to what we do in the world of work. They really form kind of the center of weight for looking at the world of work for research and for outreach in these areas. And so I'm committed to continue to strengthen these centers and institutes. And then a fundamental priority that has always been central to ILR, and that I'm really committed to continuing, is our student focus. A big priority over the next few years is going to be student aid. One of the things we know from economic downturns, and we're certainly going to see this with the COVID-19 pandemic, is that it hits students and their families hard. That increases need for student aid. And so the university is going to have to be able to do more in the student aid area over the next couple of years if we're going to maintain the access to a Cornell education that is really so central to the Cornell mission, the any person, any study mission, the need-blind admissions. Those are tougher things to do in an economic downturn, but they're really important to our values. And so we're going to have to continue with that. And the other thing connected to students clearly is the student experience, making the on-campus student experience as strong as possible, to have that kind of great sense of the ILR community on campus, that really wonderful experience students have during their time as undergraduates with our school. And that's going to mean really emphasizing the student experience, and also the kind of strong programs we have, the wonderful student clubs, student activities that are really important in enriching the student experience while they're here, and continue to encourage the student leadership that has been always a special part of ILR. ILREs tend to be vastly disproportionately represented in student government on campus and leadership of student organizations. And we're really hoping to keep that great tradition alive.
Yeah, that's great. And one of the things that I've been so impressed with since you've joined us as the dean is your ability to unite the school. I don't think a lot of people realize from outside how complex the issues are that we deal with, and how many different institutes we have across so many different topics, and then our core resident faculty and everything. And under that one ILR umbrella, you've just been able to bring it all together. And so, what have been your strategies to try and unite everyone and bring people together?
I think an important thing is the idea that there really isn't a conflict between having a complex and diverse school and also being united as one ILR. I'm Canadian by background, and Canada that's been one of the triumphs of my home country was in Canada. I think is that it's a complex country with people from all over the world, but have come together, in this one united country. I think ILR has some strengths like that. It's a small school, but a very complex school with lots of different areas, and the success of it comes from respecting all the different perspectives, the labor perspective, the management perspectives, the racial and ethnic diversity of our student body has been one of our points of pride. And the range of activities we do, the different centers and institutes, it's complex, but together that makes for a greater whole. It makes a richer place. It makes a stronger ILR. And so that's been a big priority for me, is to have people understand that everything they do, all the different wonderful things we do, they're all valuable in their own right, and together this makes us a bigger and better place.
No, that's great, and everyone appreciates it. So so our final topic, I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is going to be everyone's favorite topic, and that is our alumni. So we have such an incredibly dynamic and loyal base of alumni at ILR. It's been so impressive to deal with so many of them. What can they do to support the things that you've been talking about and what we're doing at the school?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing is certainly is continuing what you're doing right now, which is attending events, participating in activities. Online events obviously are what we're having to do right now, and we'll continue to do some online events. Hopefully, before too long, we'll also start to be doing in-person events again as well. Though we'll keep using these online tools to be able to reach out more effectively to our alumni, particularly around the country and around the globe. There's obviously cities where we have a lot of our alumni, and we have a lot of in-person events. The sort of New York City, LA, we've got a lot of alumni, and we can do more in-person events with Boston. But there are places around the country where we might have one or two alumni in a smaller center. These online events provide a real way that we can engage with our alumni, and having you engage back really makes these events work well. Something concrete that we're always looking for is alumni connections to help provide internships for our students. Those are incredibly valuable. And job leads. One of the great strengths of ILR is that our career paths are very strong. We've got great recruiting. And a lot of that is strengthened by the fact that our alumni have the commitments back to the school and help provide those career connections for our students. And so I really applaud the alumni for doing that, and I encourage that to continue. And then in terms of giving, that's a really important part of what supports the school. It supports really critical things like student aid, faculty hiring. That's really important. Certainly, the annual fund is a great way to give and support the school, and particularly in a time like this, provides the flexibility to respond to needs as they arise. The annual fund giving is particularly important to me as dean, to be able to respond when over the course of a year a real need arises. It gives us that flexibility with funds that we can then use to help out and to address a need that comes up with our students.
And that's great. That's great. So that's it. Thank you, Alex, for the conversation. And hopefully everyone found it informative and are interested to hear about all the things that are going on at the school. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Sellen, who's going to take us through the Q&A. And as a reminder, if you haven't already, please click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, type in your question, and Jennifer will roll through as many of them as she can. So thank you very much, Alex.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
Hi, everyone. We've got a few questions here ready to be answered. The first is a question about acceptance rates for applicants to ILR, and what is the status of a wait list at ILR?
So the acceptance rates are fairly constant. Acceptance has gotten harder over the recent years because we have, like Cornell as a whole, have had growing application numbers over about the last 10 to 15 years, right? So if you go back, say, 15 years to today, the acceptance rate is lower, but that's because we've got more applications, and that's sort of a longer term trend that happens. There's sort of year to year, there's slight variations up and down, We were pretty similar this year to last year, but that has been a big change over time. Some of that relating to things like it's easier to apply now with a common app than, when some of us, I remember filling out the paper forms like some of you probably did that you had to mail in. That takes a little more time and work than what the college students can do today. But we have acceptance rates of below 15% now. We are a very selective institution. We do have students on wait lists, and depending on how many students take up the offers, people come off the wait list, and that's kind of an ongoing process. We've actually had pretty good take-up of offers this year. One thing that there was some concern about was, would students actually want to come, given the uncertainties caused by the pandemic. We've actually had pretty good numbers so far, which has been a positive thing to see, that prospective students still value the Cornell education and still want to come here. So that's been really great to see.
Great. The next question relates to the mention of Ariel Apgar's research in the healthcare. The person wondered if there was any thought to including functional support groups in that research. If you could speak to that. We could also get in touch with Ariel at some point.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. Yeah, I don't know the answer if he does. I think it may, but yeah, we can forward that question to Ariel. That's an interesting one. Yeah.
So I'll get back to you, Mary, on that one. The next one is, as we think about the context of the moment, COVID, focus on structural racism, how can ILR and Cornell overall best support its students to play a critical role in the rebuilding, repair, and healing of our country in this moment and over the long term? And I might just, I'm sure you'll mention this, but you could talk about our deep roots in teaching and researching diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, I mean, I think about this, in a couple of different ways. One is supporting our students in their own experiences, and that is a big priority for us. And we know that these events put enormous strain on our students. Our African American students, are put under great strain by the events going on, and so we need to recognize that. We need to support them, and that has been something that the school has made a priority in trying to increase our support. We have a dedicated advisor who works with minority students and the minority student groups to provide additional support there. And, so that's something that we work on in that respect, recognizing the stresses that impact our students and their experience as students on campus. Another aspect, though, that we do look at is thinking about the educational experience and how it relates to these major issues facing our country. We're in the process of doing a curriculum review right now. We're kind of at an advanced stage in that. I'm hoping in the fall the faculty will adopt some updates to our curriculum. One of the things that I prioritized in that curriculum review, when I was associate dean before becoming dean, I oversaw the drafting of a curriculum review report. And one of my priorities was putting more systematically diversity and inclusion issues into the course requirements so that it's a really embedded structural part of our curriculum. I've been really pleased to see the faculty have supported that idea and expanding our course offerings. I've hired faculty who will be able to extend our course offerings relating to these issues. And I think that's really crucial. We need to have classes where the faculty are teaching the students, allowing the students to learn and look at these important issues. And I think we're making really good progress there, but we need to keep pushing on these issues.
Great, thank you. The next question is regarding the Collab Initiative in Buffalo and any updates on its replication in Ithaca.
Yes, so one of our great successes has been the Buffalo Collab program, where our Buffalo office works with community organizations and has a program, the High Roads program, where our students get to spend time in the summer in Buffalo working with these community organizations. It's great applied learning that the students are doing. They're taking what they know from the classroom out into the community and be really engaged with local organizations there. We're now going to replicate that idea in Ithaca. One of our extension faculty members, Ian Greer, I recently appointed as director of the Ithaca Collab, and he's going to set up a similar program locally here in Ithaca and extending around in our part of central New York. That's going to be an opportunity for more students to have this kind of experience, connecting with community organizations, looking at economic development in the local community. And we're also discussing how we can do similar things in New York City. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to set up something like that in New York City. And this is something where certainly, the alumni can help us out with these kind of activities. Certainly in Buffalo, our Buffalo-based alumni have been really helpful with the Buffalo programs. And I think, doing this in New York City, we can really draw on those alumni connections in the community there.
Great, thanks. There's just 2 more questions, just to let everybody know if you'd like to get one in, now's the time to type it in. So the next question is related to virtual learning. So the question is, many students had not had virtual learning experience before March. Can ILR help to bring the experiences of remote and virtual workers to all Cornell students before fall 2020? And that's related to techniques, learnings, best practices.
Yeah, so it's we think about it both from the perspective of the student and the instructor in terms of getting ready for online learning. We have to be ready as instructors for doing effective online teaching. That means both getting the technology right. I'm going to give a little shout out to our team who's supporting this webinar, D.H. Goodall, David Lane, Allison Dunchik. They provided some great support for us in going to online teaching, which was really important. And our faculty have been adapting to it with their help so that we're going to be ready for the fall. But then for students too, this is an adaptation. Even though this is an incredibly tech-savvy generation, this is a different experience of learning. Now, interestingly, I've got 2 daughters, one in high school, one in middle school. They've been going through the secondary school version of our transition, where they've been learning online. So our incoming class in the fall almost universally will have had this experience of doing online learning this spring. What we're going to try and focus on for the fall is coming up with ways that we can make the online learning experience even better. We've done it, I think, as good a job as we could in short notice circumstances this spring. But we know there's going to be some classes that need to be online in the fall, as well as some that will be in person. And so we need to do our best to make those a really good learning experience. And we have been doing things like talking to students and faculty about their experiences this spring, and then we're going to try and iterate from what we've been learning from the spring experience to inform that fall experience as well. And draw on our expertise. The last thing I mentioned on this is we have a faculty member of the HR department, Professor Brad Bell, who's probably the leading HR expert on remote work and virtual teams. And he's been writing about that for like a decade, way before we all suddenly became experts on Zoom. He's been studying this systematically, and he did a webinar that I think had about 4,000 participants on remote work a few weeks ago. So we're going to be drawing on that expertise we have in-house as well.
Okay, great. We did get a couple more questions in, so there's 3 or 4 more, and we've got about 8 minutes, so hopefully we can get through them. What percentage of ILR grads go on to law school, and how has that percentage changed over the years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I went to law school myself. I was 89 to 92 in law school. And there's been a change in the trajectory of how people go to law school, that I went straight out of undergrad, straight into law school, and that was the predominant mode at that point in time. Nowadays, it's much more common that students will work for a couple of years and then go to law school. And so if we look at our numbers, percentages of students who go directly into law school, they drop down quite a bit. It used to be like a third or so of the class, a quarter to a third of the class would go to law school directly. That isn't the case anymore. It's more like, 5% or 6 or 7%. But if you look out 5 years after, our sense is, and this is something we've been trying to get some better information on from the alumni, but it's probably, a quarter or so of our graduates eventually go to law school, 20, 25% probably. And so there's been a little drop, but not actually that much drop in the overall numbers that go to law school, but a bigger drop, a bigger change in the pattern that they'll typically work and then go to law school.
Great, thanks. With all the issues related to the current situation, has any thought been given to opening a dialogue with police unions regarding how their membership can improve race relations?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think that's something that we're gonna we've been having certainly discussions amongst ourselves around this, but I think it's one of those things that going forward is going to be an important issue. We certainly have people who've looked at public sector unions and particularly police unions over time. David Lipsky, our recently retired former dean, some of his important research was on police and fire unions and the impact of collective bargaining in those industries. And I think there's obviously the new set of issues that need to be looked at in relation to police unions. I think one thing that I think needs to be done in any kind of examination is to look broadly. Unions are part of the picture, but the issue of race relations and police are a really broad and deep one. You think about things like police oversight by the community and by municipalities, the kind of governance issues like the composition of who goes into police work. There's a sort of long history of looking at the role of affirmative action and diversity enhancement programs in occupations like this. And so I think there's going to be, we should be having a renewed attention to these. These set of issues are things that I'm planning to include in some of our discussions in the colloquium in the fall. This is something I would like us to be addressing there with our incoming students. They look at what they can learn through their ILR education, their ILR curriculum. I'd like to put on the agenda there the dual crises we're facing right now: the COVID-19 pandemic and the crisis in racial justice and issues in our society. I think these are exactly what our students should be discussing and thinking about. And so I'm going to encourage us to look at that.
Maybe just real quick, explain what the colloquium is.
Yeah. So this is an important part of our curriculum. All the new students, first years and transfer students, all take this colloquium, which is basically their introduction to college life and to the ILR school. It's a slightly different kind of course that really covers a broad set of topics, introducing them to the school, but also has a big component of learning about college life, the kind of support that we get from our various student services units, and also that kind of adaptation to how to thrive as a college student. So it's an important introductory part of their experience as new students.
Great, thank you, Alex. So 2 more questions. I'm going to, so given the challenges of online learning, what attention processes will get attention for practicing soft skills?
So yeah, that's one of those interesting, tricky questions in online learning. The danger of online learning is you don't have that personal face-to-face interaction, which is such an important part of developing soft skills. And that's something we've been kind of working on and thinking about how we can do that more effectively. How do you do group projects online, breaking people out into small groups? And it is challenging. That's what Professor Bell's research looks at, is how do you effectively do teamwork in a virtual setting? Team processes are a really important soft skill, and so we are looking at that. But I think frankly, that is one of the reasons we're working really hard to try and come up with a way that we can have a full semester where we have an important in-person component, so that our students may be doing some online learning, but they'll also be doing a lot of in-person learning. And I think that's the value of that, being able to do both, is that it would give the students that value.
Great. The last question is, how about the idea of a monthly or periodic alumni virtual session as a way to extend this virtual reunion as a kind of unintended positive outcome of this pandemic? And I left that question last. It wasn't the actual last question, but yes, I thought it was a great way to end the session. So let's have your answer, Alex.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, and I think you and I, can work on coming up with a way to do that. One of the good things about these virtual ways of connecting is it does reduce a barrier to access. That we can get a broader range of people involved and connect with them through this mechanism. Once we can get out there, we're going to be going out there again and meeting up with you, and we'll be having drinks with cocktails and canapes and stuff like that, and talking in person. That's going to be great too. But I don't think we should give up. What we've been learning from this is that we can do more of these kind of virtual events as well, and that will help us connect with more of the alumni. I think we should do both. So I think that's a great suggestion. And
I do too.
Yeah, so, let's take it up.
So everyone that's still on the line, look forward to, you'll see an announcement in the coming months. We'll be sure to do this again. So Absolutely. With that, thank you, Alex, for joining us, and Tom for taking care of the interview section of this virtual reunion. I just want to take this time to thank everyone who has joined us today. We have recorded this session, and it'll be available soon on our website, and we're going to send it out to all alumni so that they can take a look at this at their leisure, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Happy reunion.
Happy reunion all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.